The word cinema comes from the French word cinematography, which translates directly to motion picture. In the 17th and 18th century, an early form of image projector called lantern slides were familiar to our modern-day counterpart, but the slides were made of glass and were limited by the number one could show per second. In the 19th century, there was a vast proliferation in the visual forms of popular culture as a result of the Industrial Revolution. Such examples include books of photographs, illustrated fiction, and various forms of advertisements. Among the numerous advances in society at the time was the newly expanded middle class, which could now afford to have leisure time, which they spent with visits to circuses, amusement parks, music halls, theater troupes, viewing dioramas, and stereoscopes. A typical diorama at the time would be a painted backdrop featuring 3D figures that depicted historical events, and a stereoscope was a handheld viewer that created three-dimensional effects by using oblong cards with two photographs printed side by side. Scientists of the time theorized that the human eye will perceive motion if a series of slightly different images are placed before it in a rapid succession, minimally around 16 frames per second. The phenakistoscope was an early animation device that used the persistence of vision principle to create an illusion of motion. Zoetropes were also devices that produced the illusion of motion from a rapid succession of static pictures. However, these images needed to be projected on a surface, and the only way to do so was with glass lantern slides, but they could not be produced in rapid enough succession to create this illusion of motion, and photography was not advanced enough to meet this need. The process of exposure, or presenting rays of light to a photosensitive surface, needed to be sped up, and in order for it to be a true motion picture, it needed split-second exposure time. In 1888, George Eastman devised a camera that made photographs on rolls of thin paper and started the Eastman Kodak Company. The next year, he introduced transparent rolls of film, which was a huge breakthrough in the move towards cinema. A film strip has to stop briefly while light entered through the lens and exposed each frame. A shutter then covered the film as another moved into place. A shutter is a mechanical device for opening and closing the aperture of a camera lens to expose film or the like. Aperture is an opening, usually circular, that limits the quantity of light that can enter an optical instrument.